in Ottawa, in Calgary, in Vancouver, in Edmonton, in Regina, in Hamilton, in Toronto, in Montreal, across this country. We had 14 reporters in 7 cities following the million-person march in support of kids and parental rights against this gender queer extremism that targets kids for. It's just so crazy. And Lincoln, you were there on Parliament Hill. I was trapped in this courtroom today, so I couldn't really follow it. I was retweeting your stuff. Why don't you give our viewers a couple of minutes of updates of what you saw, and then we'll throw to some video clips that you took. So why don't you just tell us in your own words what happened?
So today we attended the 1 Million March for Children. And as you mentioned, these were marches that were happening all across Canada. So myself, Robert Krychek, Kian Simone, we were at the Ottawa March, okay? And I have not seen this many people on Parliament Hill since the Freedom Convoy, the Truckers Convoy. I also haven't seen the amount of police that we saw since the Freedom Convoy. Tons and tons and tons of Canadians were there to basically speak out, protest, demonstrate against the indoctrination and sexualization of their children in schools, whether it's the school curriculum, the gender ideology. They're just here to take a stance, and it was welcomed with many counter demonstrators who simply believe that there's nothing wrong with what's going on in our schools. So it was a bit of a contrast.
Now, as always, or as usual, people who say they're against hate and against violence, well, they're often the haters and the violent ones. Tell us about some of the physical scuffles that happened on the Hill.
Yeah, well, one that happened to myself and to Kian and I was we saw Jagmeet was
the leader of the NDP.
Yeah, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, was standing with the counter demonstrators. So we wanted to hopefully have a chance to speak to him. So we couldn't get very far. We probably stepped about 5 feet. Let me just explain. So the counter demonstrators were on one side, the demonstrators on one side. So the police were splitting them up, tons of police. So we tried to step maybe 5 feet into the other side, I guess where we're not welcomed, and we were quickly stopped.
Stopped by whom?
So one of the counter demonstrators, a lady who basically just told us not to go any further, which was followed by another man who was very, very aggressive. I'm sure we'll be able to show some of the footage, but he got right in our face, asked us what the heck we were doing there, why are we there, grabbed my camera, grabbed it again, and tried to toss my camera down. Luckily, I had it around my neck. If I didn't have the camera around my neck, that thing would have dropped for sure because of the amount of force that was used. So that's the one thing I don't understand. These people, they claim they want rights for everybody. They want to protect their kids, protect quote-unquote trans kids. But it seems that the demonstrators are the ones that are the peaceful ones, and there's a lot more anger coming from the counter demonstrators. Just my observations.
So you say there was a ton of cops, and there was sort of the two sides were kept apart, and that sounds good. Again, I haven't really seen it. I've been in this court all day. But did the police see that Antifa trans guy put hands on you and your stuff? Did the cops see that?
No, I don't think any cops saw. I'm not sure for certain, but we were kind of behind a bit of a crowd, so I think we were tucked away. So I don't know if they saw.
Were you hurt?
No, we have the footage though. We have my camera angle, we have Kian's camera angle, so we have it all covered, right? So a couple other things to note, there was a few people detained as well at the protest.
What were they detained for?
So I don't know if they were arrested, detained, but they were definitely taken into police custody for a short period of time. But there seemed to be some sort of a feud between flags being one of the rainbow flags. I'm not sure what type of rainbow flag.
I saw a flag get stomped on. Was that one of the things?
Yes, which ultimately led to the flag being stomped on, and it just led to a kerfuffle. And next thing you know, police were dragging a younger gentleman outside of the protest, and they took him away. And ultimately, I don't know if they arrested him or what happened. I guess we might find out.
Now, there are some colorful characters on both sides. I think on the pro-family side, the colorful characters, I think, for example, of the young guy, Josh Alexander. You know, maybe I shouldn't call him a colorful character because that implies that it's a checkerboard color. Where I mean, there's a principled young man who's been kicked out of his own Catholic school for standing up against the trans ideology. He's routinely physically attacked by the other side, and he sort of takes it as a punching bag. And I've never seen him fight back, which is sort of amazing for him to go in as a kind of sacrificial lamb to prove a point. He's a very interesting young man. Did you see him on Parliament Hill? And if so, was he targeted? Maybe I'm not describing him properly. I like the guy, if it's not clear. Tell me what happened to him if you saw anything.
I didn't see anything happen to Josh Alexander. I don't think any altercations, any confrontations actually happened with Josh Alexander. But Josh is really a trailblazer in this whole movement. Student activist, kicked out of his high school, has had all sorts of trouble for standing up against the gender ideology that we're seeing being pushed in schools. So kudos to Josh, and we did an excellent interview with Josh. Robert interviewed Josh that you'll be able to see in the full report that we release.
Okay, great. And how about other folks? For example, was Billboard Chris there? I think Pastor Henry Hildebrandt was there. Tell me if you saw any other names from the Freedom Movement.
Yep, well, so we saw Maxime Bernier was the only politician that I saw there. Now, I might be wrong about that. There may have been other politicians, but the only politician that I saw was Maxime Bernier. A lot of people were asking where Pierre Poilievre was. A lot of people were asking that. Wasn't there. I guess people are wondering where he stands on this. So we did also speak to the organizer of the protest.
And who was that?
I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
A student, activist, a Muslim person, I understand. Was that who was a Muslim activist?
Yes, and I believe he's been running or he's been organizing some of the movements that we're seeing.
Well, that's very interesting because in the past, Justin Trudeau has counted on the Muslim demographic as a voting bloc. I see today Trudeau put out a tweet just calling folks transphobes and homophobes. There was a distinct Muslim presence in many of the cities. In fact, there was a video clip, maybe it was yours. I saw some Mennonites walking next to some Muslim women in hijabs in sort of a common cause. If I was Justin Trudeau, I would be careful about calling anyone who objects to gender ideology a transphobe, a homophobe, because I'm going to guess that that's 80-90% of the Muslim community. And Trudeau is basically telling them that they're hateful.
Well, yeah, you bring up a really good point that I want to share with the viewers, is that this protest, just like the truckers' convoy, it's people from all walks of life, all flavors, every single type of person is here. And it's not about vaccines, it's not about anything. This is something that a lot more people are able to jump on board with and stand behind, because it's very, very obvious that something really strange and not right is happening in our schools in Canada.
You know, the trucker convoy was two things that Trudeau is not. It was ethnically diverse and it was working class. And I sense that this movement here, this parents movement, is ethnically diverse, and it may be working class as well, since the fancy PhD, you need a PhD to believe gender theory. Like, there's some things that are so dumb that you have to have a PhD to believe it. So I would imagine that there was some overlap demographically between this and the trucker convoy, and I think it's dangerous business for Trudeau to smear it. When Trudeau starts calling people transphobes or homophobes, you know he's sort of in his go-to panic mode, change the subject, lash out. I don't know if it's working anymore.
No, and if you're on the ground here, you can really see that the names, the name calling that Trudeau, the labeling that Trudeau, the division that Trudeau tries to create, it's not working. We saw that today. People are very fed up with what's going on with the government and everything that's stemming below because of the federal government, the Liberal government. So a lot of people have questions. There's not a lot of answers, and it's kind of a gray area. We don't know if this gender ideology, the sexualization, the indoctrination is going to continue in schools, if there's anybody that's going to be able to put a stop to this, because right now it seems like it's full steam ahead, and we don't know what the future has in store.
Well, very interesting. And like I say, you were one of 14 journalists that we had deployed across the country, which is actually the largest project we've done since the trucker convoy. If I recall, we actually had like 19 people in the field. It is a huge national movement. It's sometimes I call it the under news. What I mean by that is it's the news that real people talk about, but the regime media, they want to talk about global warming, and they want to talk about Ukraine, and they want to talk about anything other than what real people are talking about. It's the kind of news that percolates beneath the surface. It was the same way with the trucker convoy. The fancy pants journalists were scared, and they stayed up in their towers, and they didn't dare come down with the ruffians. I think there's a similar thing going on now. Let me ask you about that. Did you see any regime media, by which I mean CBC, CTV, Global, even these days I put Post Media in there, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star. Did you see any regime media?
Yep, mainstream media, regime media, legacy media, whatever you want to call them, they were.
Oh, you did?
Yep, they were on the ground there. Yeah, they were reporting on it. They were in the streets reporting on it. Now, what's going to come out of those reports? I guess we'll have to wait and see. We'll wait and see if there's a narrative that they're trying to push or a narrative created. But I guess time will tell, and we'll see in the days ahead what kind of perspective they're putting on the protest.
Well, that's an improvement over their convoy coverage where they just huddled under their desks and were afraid of the honking. Well, Lincoln, great to catch up with you. Thanks very much. I'm sorry that you were physically aggressed today, but thank God it sounds like you were more shocked and surprised than hurt. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just the camera. It was just the camera, and it was more of a shock than anything because I never had my camera grabbed so aggressively.
I'm glad you had the strap on around your neck, although I hope that didn't hurt. You know, the violence you just suffered there is more violence than the entire trucker convoy committed in its entire duration. If any side calls themselves anti-hate, that's generally code that they are actually the haters. They're co-opting that word.